Hello, my name is Romulo Navarrete, and I'm part of the Programs and Investments team at SeedStars. At SeedStars, we aim to impact people's lives in emerging markets through technology and entrepreneurship. For the last 6 years, we have traveled around the world, all over from Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and Asia, scouting for the most promising startups. It is in these ventures that we have found amazing entrepreneurs, and we have been able to connect them with different players like mentors, governments, corporations, and investors. By the way, we've also invested ourselves in some of these startups. We have around 30 startups in our portfolio from different sectors, industry, and locations. Among this journey, we have been able to also start certain programs like the investment readiness program, acceleration programs, pre-incubation ones, etc. And with all this experience, we are today here gathering our best tips from our point of view as entrepreneurs ourselves and also as investors for you to be able to pitch your startup in front of investors. So this is today's topic, the art of pitching for investors. So let's start. What do all successful pitches have in common? They might vary in terms of format, number of slides, if you have one person or two persons pitching, the tone of their voice, how comfortable they feel with English, the organization of them, etc. It doesn't matter what are the differences that you will be stumbled upon, but one thing they all share in common is that you can see, and the audience can really see and feel the level of preparedness and how ready you are into pitching your startup. So, what are the things that we recommend you should have always ready? Either you because have already a meeting scheduled with an investor, or because it's always good to have it ready and not needing them, rather than needing them and don't have them ready. The first thing, I'm sure you've heard before, is the elevator pitch. For those who don't know what an elevator pitch is, let's think about that you are in the ground floor of a building and you need to go to the 7th floor of the building. And you enter the elevator, and then an investor next to you asks you, so what do you do? So in a short period of time, you should be able to pitch what your startup is about, with the main factors, something that is completely understandable, and remembering that you're not going to be able to say everything about your startup, but the intention of the elevator pitch is to awake enough interest for the investor to further know more about your startup in a later stage. It normally comes into the format of 1 minute, 3 minutes. So be able to practice it, and we're going to dig into it in a bit. The second aspect that we recommend that you have ready is the investment summary or teaser. This normally comes into the format of a text document. And in it, not only do you have your elevator pitch, but also your problem, the problem you're solving, the solution, the traction you've gathered, who is in your team, and also what are the investment conditions that you are seeking. So how much money you're raising, what's the format that you are raising this money in, and also what is the structure that you have foreseen for the investment per se. After this, the presentation or your pitch deck. So these are the so commonly called the slides. The good thing about the pitch deck is that you can expand your creativity a little bit more and be able to visually represent what your startup is in different slides. So the main attribute of the slides is that first, it's very graphic, and second, there is a storytelling component into it. So by the time that the person is going through the slides, they would be able to be seduced about what your startup is into a nice storytelling format. The opposite of, not necessarily the opposite, but something completely different from the investment summary, which is a very straightforward, straight to the point, bullet points investment summary or teaser. And then, last but not least, the information pitch deck. You will be challenged when talking to an investor about how sure you are about certain attributes of your startup or certain hypothesis. Call it like, how did you arrive to this number? So how many sales have you got over the last 12 months and how much have they evolved? Do you have a graph about it? Or how did you do your market research? So in the information pitch deck, you should compile all these, let's say, backup information that you don't want to include in your investment summary or in your presentation pitch deck just because it will sort of contaminate the format of it. But you should have it so that by the time that you're asked these questions or you're challenged by any point of your pitch, you can say, yeah, so actually take a look at this slide, a backup slide, or I will send you our market research, or I'll send you a document attached to an email where you will be able to see further information about what you're requesting. So again, you don't necessarily need to have everything in your pitch deck or everything in your investment summary, but you should be able to have the information, yes or yes, ready to be sent as fast as one click goes. What has been your experience when pitching? I would like you to think for a bit. We've always pitched our startup, even if it wasn't necessarily in front of an investor. You might have stumbled into a friend that asks you, so what are you planning to do? What is it that you do? Or even your family. What was the thing that didn't work well? Or better said, what was that thing that could have worked better? In most cases is that you fall into your own words. So you're not able to explain necessarily with clear points what your startup is about. The person that is hearing you doesn't necessarily understand in the end what is it that you're doing. They are like, so are you like an app or like a website or a marketplace? I didn't really get what was it that you were doing. So these are the most common mistakes. And if you have stumbled upon this, it's probably because we should just reconsider how our pitch is. So this is why we're here today. To be prepared. In terms of format, it's really up to you and or the conditions that you're given. So if you're in a pitching competition or you are in front of a jury panel with certain rules, you should know about this beforehand so you are able to prepare. Normally pitches last between 3 and 5 minutes. Anything more than that is just very, let's call it boring to hear. The attention span goes away. Again, it doesn't mean that you cannot follow up on meetings. It doesn't mean that you cannot send information attached into an email. The pitch has the objective to sell your startup, to awake enough interest so that you can schedule follow-up meetings. In terms of number of slides, it's really up to you, but we don't recommend more than, let's say, 8 slides max. You can be 10, 15, and maybe even a couple more in case that you want to have those backup slides, but it shouldn't be 40, 50, 60 slides. If you're sending your pitch deck and suddenly it has like 50 slides, the investor's probably going to look at the file and be like, okay, 80 slides, 60 slides, I'm not going to be able to go through them right now. So make sure that you are able to have this, your startup pretty much compile into a smaller number of slides. Let's go into the pitch structure. And you will see that there is different literature about this. And again, we're just here sharing best practices that we have seen from our journey, supporting entrepreneurs and also investing in certain startups. The pitch structure is gathered for us into a way that it answers the question, how will your company make me rich? It doesn't mean that you don't have a social impact, or it doesn't mean that you're just a for-profit and you don't care about what you're doing. But at the end of the day, even if it's an impact investor, they want to know how is it that your company, your business model, your startup is going to make them rich. Let's go into the structure. Facts tell, stories sell. This is something that, before we jump into the structure, I just want to emphasize, because the way that we transmit our pitch has to be compelling enough so that people are engaged into what you're saying. So the facts, you will be portraying them on the slides, you'll be selling them, you'll be saying them on bullet points, you can send them over an investment summary, etc. But it's no wonder that people are more engaged with stories, and you can even refer this back to the humanity in the first beginning, the early beginning of human story around the fire, and people just telling stories to each other. And it is proven that people tend to have a wider attention span and have interest in what you're saying whenever there is this storytelling component. So make sure that with the structure that I'm going to present to you in a bit, you always have this storytelling component to it. So no wonder that we start with the problem. It is very important that you start with a problem that you are trying to solve and not with a solution. People don't really necessarily care about what you've come up with or what your solution is. They care about the problem that is out there. Customers care about their problem. They don't care about the solution of different providers. They just want to get their problem solved. In the case of investors, there's no different. They want to know what's the problem like. If it's a real problem, if it's huge, what's the potential of people that have this problem, and more. We're going to dig into that in a bit. Then it comes the solution. So then there is a problem, and this is once you have seduced the audience with the problem existing, you present what you've come up with, so your solution. After the market, what's the potential of this solution into the market, how big it is, how sexy it is. The traction and or the growth plan. So what is it that you have already achieved? So you can say, okay, there was a problem, there's a solution that we came up with, this is a potential, and actually we've already tapped into this market because we have validated our startup with these numbers, with this number of users, with this number of page views or download in the App Store, etc. Your business model, how is it that you're making money? Commission, referrals, a fixed fee, premium, etc. Team, who is behind the startup, and here we're gonna dig into it in a bit, but it's very important that we consider that team is one of the fundamental pieces of your pitch. Probably because there is a problem and you're still maybe validating it, or the problem will go bigger, or your solution will evolve. The product per se, so your solution will change throughout the upcoming months and years. And the market as well. The market trends might vary, the demand might vary, might behave differently, etc. But what it is important is that one thing remains the same. It's the team, it's the people behind. So that is why it's not uncommon to hear some investors saying that they invest in the people, not in the startup. And then the ask. If your startup is so great, then what do you need? And this is a good closing for your pitch, because are you needing money or are you needing talent? Are complete different things, and investors want to know what is it that you need, and if it's the case of money, how much money do you need, and what are you going to do with it? And maybe it's the case that you're not raising at the moment, but you're looking for talents, or you're looking for potential partners or distribution channels. You can also include this in the ask. In terms of order of importance, this is a structure that it can help you somehow put a little bit of organization into the different ideas of your startup. So you can say something like, our advantages of the team comes first, that we want to portray that it's a solid team, have achieved this traction, this unit economics, and we believe that there is a potential in the market and the competition that exists out there with our product, with our solution. So people, unit economics, market and competition, and product. Remember, there's always competition, even if it's a substitute or an alternative for the customers. There's always they're always trying to solve the problem in a different way. So let's start with the first. The first section of the pitch is the problem. So think about, what is the problem that you are solving? Why is it an important problem to solve? Why should people care about this problem? Is it very painful in society, like an outbreak of a disease, for example, that exists? Or is it more like a dating issue, people that don't have boyfriends or girlfriends? Like, how great is the pain, and how how challenging it is for society. Who feels the pain? Who are the ones affected by this problem? Here we also recommend you that you tell a story. So you can start even with putting a character into your startup. So you can be like, Romulo cannot find a solution, cannot find a way to finance his house, for example. And then maybe the problem is about financial credit analysis in emerging markets, and your solution might be a platform that helps with that, for example. By putting a person into it or by telling the story of somebody, you will be able to have more of a human connection. You can even draw for personal experience. So if it was you that felt that pain, if it's you that has this problem, or you were walking down the street and you saw this problem, you can even say it as well. This will definitely, as I mentioned, generate this human connection and generate this empathy and emotions with your listeners, and people will be more attached to hear you throughout the rest of your pitch. Try to avoid making it complicated and overloaded with numbers. If people want to know about numbers, they'll for sure ask you, or you can for sure send those numbers after in an email, or you can have them as your backup slides. So make sure that whenever you are exposing your problem, you keep it as simple and as lean as possible, yet making sure that your audience is understanding the severity and the importance of this problem. So let's go to an example. This is a Mexican startup that won one of our local competitions in Mexico. It's called Apply. And this is how they portray their problem. 1 billion missed work days per year due to turnover and absenteeism. Source. Now, see here, they didn't make a screenshot of this sources and just portray it in there with a lot of numbers and graphics. They just put the source in there. So they portray some credibility, but they make sure that the audience reads 1 billion missed work days per year as the first thing in the slide. And then the next one is 20 million underemployed Mexicans, students, unemployed, part-time workers. So with this, and also take a look at the background pictures as well. There's definitely a good balance on the picture's meaning, but also on the format of the picture is not necessarily portrayed, let's say, as a natural picture. It has some effect to it that makes the text be understandable. And it might seem like a little detail, but a small detail, but it's very important that you make sure that you are visually representing well your pitch and the slides. So probably if this was like a original photograph, we wouldn't be able to read the text. So 1 billion missed work days per year due to turnover and absenteeism. In the background, a corporate picture. So you know that this is a problem probably felt by corporations or the private sector. And then on the other hand, you have 20 million underemployed Mexicans, so people that are students, that are part-time workers, or that are unemployed, and you can see a picture as well portraying this problem. So this is a good example into how to show the problem, and of course it's complemented with what you are saying in words. How are you solving this problem? And this is where your solution comes into the game. How does your solution fix the problem? What are the key features? What exactly makes you unique? And here, don't just say, we are the best platform for job search, or we are the number one, we are the biggest. Make sure that the adjective that you choose them carefully, because of course, we expect that you are the best, we expect that you are good, we expect that you're reliable. So you can show some images of your solution. You can put some screenshots. You can put like the homepage or the dashboard of your solution, something that is gonna really transmit what your solution is. Remember in the beginning I said sometimes people finish listening to your pitch and they're like, okay, but I didn't understand. What is it that you are? Like an app or a website or like a software as a service? So make sure that like with this, by showing images, you can pretty much tackle this issue. Don't overload it though. It's not about showing all the steps of how do people sign up into your app and how are the different screens, navigation, and so on. It's just like the main one. Avoid getting too technical, and for this, you should know your audience. You should know if your investors knows enough about your industry, or is an investor that has already done certain investments in sort of similar like yours, if they have like industry experience. So definitely knowing your audience is a piece of the homework we have to do beforehand, so we can have a more tailor-made pitch. Explain exactly what your product is, and here is another a structure that we are providing you. So we solve the problem for these customers by doing this. So we solve the 20 million underemployment, the absenteeism that exists in the Mexican market for more than 20 million underemployed Mexicans between university students, part-time employees, and underemployed by building a platform XYZ. Let's go to the Apple example, actually. So a complete artificial intelligence powered recruiting solution. And they actually put a screenshot of the website of Apple. So we are not necessarily seeing the back end, we are not seeing every single detail, but we can see that it's pretty much, it looks like this. It's powered by artificial intelligence. It's a recruiting solution, and it does anything from the candidate sourcing and screening to the interview coordination in a way that it makes the recruiting have more automation into it, so you can hire better and faster. And even by the images that they put there, you can see some sneak peeks on how it looks like. So you have like a dashboard, you have some graphics, you have like a calendar, you have like a profile view probably of the candidate, you have a messaging future. So they give you some hints on what the platform looks like without getting too technical or without getting too much into it. What are some of the investor red flags by now? Why do users care about your product or service? If they ask you this question, it's because probably they haven't really understood the severity of the problem. So I invite you to actually ask yourself these questions together with your team and try to answer them in a concise way. So why do users care about your product or service? What are the major product milestones? What are the key differentiated features of your product or service? Again, related to the additive that we talked a little bit ago. What have you learned from early versions of the product or service? This is more for startups that have gone beyond the MVP and are probably already in a later stage. But if you have thought about something in the very beginning and you've built like an MVP and you have tweaked it a little bit, so you have pivoted it and so on, probably you have done this because you have learned something like in this journey. So we want to know this because this is going to give insights to the investor that first, you are proactively testing your solution, and second, that you are adapting it to the customer needs and you're learning on the way. What are the 2 or 3 key features you plan to add? This is related to something investors or people in the startup world call roadmap. So what is it what's next in your plans? How often do you envision enhancing or updating a product or service? You cannot say all the time, like try to organize certain recurrent meetings with your product team or with your team to revise the product and to make some updates and have this roadmap in place so you can answer this question in a structured way. And what could go wrong? And please don't say nothing. We're going to be super successful because everybody fails. Everybody fails, and you're going to be stumbled upon different things that you didn't expect that will happen to you, but either way they will happen. Things won't go as smoothly as you planned, or you will have somebody in your team underperforming, or you won't be able to find that person that you need exactly for your team. So there's plenty of things that could go wrong, and it's good that you understand your weakness. It's like whenever you go to a job interview and they ask you, okay, great, these are your strengths. We know these great things about you, but tell me about your weakness. And then you're like, oh, I am perseverant. Like, make sure that you really know what could go wrong. So make sure to know what are the weaknesses of your startup. Now, so far we've explored the problem, the solution, and now if you remember well, what comes after is the opportunity. So how big is the opportunity? And remember here, investors probably are not going to be very interested in if there is the opportunity is reduced to 1 or 2 people in the world, or 4 or 5 or 10. They want to see that if they put some money into your startup, you'll be able to show them an entire market of opportunity. And you see here in your right 3 different purple circles, and they are the TAM, the SUM, and the SOM. Have you heard about them before? Don't worry, we're gonna get into it. How big is your market? And there's 3 different market sizes that and ways of calculating them that we're gonna jump into a bit. Big or amazingly promising is not enough, so that's why we've come up with these TAM, SUM, and SOM in explanations. What sources, assumptions did you use to calculate how big is your market? Here we really want to see how data-driven you are and how much of the homework of actually doing the research you have done. Have you used top-down assumptions or bottom-up assumptions? So you've come up with this big World Bank or let's say UN study for the entire world, or you have more like gathered these insights for customer survey within your neighborhood. And top down, bottom up is not that one is better than the other. Actually, the best combinations is when you can mix both of them, but we want to know which one did you use and what numbers did you arrive after doing this exercise. What do we encourage? That you demonstrate it's a worthy market to address. So this is something that, again, investors want to see. Don't use unresearched or unrealistic numbers. If you stumble upon a number that for you is not interesting, you might reconsider either the way you've conducted the research, so do additional research to see if really this is the path that the research is taking you, or you might reconsider even your entire value proposition, because maybe it's the opportunity is not that big enough to be attractive to an investor. Whatever it is, don't come unprepared, unresearched, unrealistic, without really reliable data sources for this. It really doesn't show a lot of professionalism. So let's go into the terminology of TAM, SAM, and SOM. So TAM stands for total addressable market, and just for the name of it, you might have a hint already of what does it mean. So it's the market you can address as a total, like the global one. Then you have the serviceable available markets, probably the one that you're going to be able to serve within like your limitations. And then there's the SOM, which is a serviceable obtainable market, something that you can obtain quick. And each of them is, let's say, included in the other one. That's why they are shown into this circles format. So the full population that could purchase from you, I will go into the examples in a bit. The population that is actually purchasing from you, and the population you can reach given your constraints. So let's say that I want to do a ticketing platform for cinema tickets. It's an app, so that you can purchase your cinema ticket from your app, and you just can walk into the cinema without having to use cash, without having to arrive to the cinema, and then suddenly there's no availability anymore. So this is a very common startup business model. So my TAM would be the entire population that goes to the cinema, so something between 10 and 85 years. So it's like the big portion of the market. If I want to calculate the SAM, is the population that is actually going to purchase from me. So I would maybe, to find this number, I will probably look into how many tickets, cinema tickets, are sold, let's say in 6 months or in 1 year in my city. And then the sum, something that I can reach quickly, or pretty much the first market I'm going to address, is probably the people that love cinema in the neighborhood of my city and are not loyal to their usual theater, so they're always looking for the best options in terms of pricing and, let's say, location, etc. So these are actual numbers that you can find. So the total population of people, you can find it probably by big studies, the number of tickets sold per time period in one geographical area. You can find it probably in studies on the internet, or you can pretty much have a call with the cinema suppliers and know this number, as well as the people that love the cinema in your specific neighborhood. And probably this is going to be the easiest one. So the easiest one to get in terms of bottom-up approach. So if you already kind of foresee, if I would go to make a survey in my neighborhood, that is definitely a bottom-up approach in this particular example. If I take the study of, let's say, the government statistics census, and I want to know the entire population within a city, that's definitely a top-down approach in this case. So for the top down, you determine the total market and you estimate what we want to see here from all that big market. We want to determine what's going to be my share as a startup. So from the big one to the small one, and avoid number 1% of China fallacy. So this is a common thing that happens sometimes when we hear pitches. People are like, oh yeah, so the market is huge and we just want like 1%. So if you say 1%, okay, it's okay if it's actually proven that you can obtain this 1% and why you came up with this number. But if you're just throwing up 1% just because, then it's not the best practice. The bottom-up approach, on the other hand, is we go to the cinema and we understand first how many tickets does each cinema sells on average per day, and we multiply that by 30 to understand the number of tickets sold in a month, and then by 12 to understand the number of tickets sold in a year. Then we multiply this number by the number of cinemas that exist in my neighborhood or in the city, and then I'm already calculating the potential sales. And then I say, okay, which are the cinemas that I can actually already have the buy-in, which is the cinema chain that I'm going to be able to convince with most probability, convince them to use the app together with me. So where can I sell my product or my service? And after, I can pretty much also understand what's the number that each of the cinemas have sold in the last year, just to have a benchmark and comparison between the numbers that I'm getting this year by asking them and or the numbers that they have done in the last year, so we can understand certain market trends. So this is definitely a bottom-up approach. And again, the combination of these two is going to be a beautiful one, because it's going to be able to give you a more narrowed approach into how big your market is. It's good to have both approaches if it's possible for you. Let's go into another example. Let's go into the example of a co-working space. So, you know that co-working spaces normally cater people that have a service sector job. So somebody that is working in a service provider company or sector. And if we calculate the entire number of jobs, let's say in 32 key markets that I foresee I will enter, and then I calculate the average monthly seat price that I want to charge the co-workers, I'm going to stand upon $1.3 trillion if I multiply the number of people in these jobs, multiply by how much I would charge them, multiply by the number of months within a year, which is 12. And this is my TAM. Now, my sound would be okay, maybe of all these jobs, I just want to tackle first those that are, let's say, graduates in, and I want to tackle those ones in urban areas. And in order to be more precise in my calculations, I'm only seeing those that are graduates and companies that have less than 250 people, because I've done my research, and companies beyond this number, they will actually prefer to have their own office in an own building or an owned office. They don't want to do co-working. So I calculate that, and then I suddenly arrive to $144 billion, which is actually 11% of the TAM. And then if I want to go more granular to the sum, I said, okay, just taking into consideration the next 3 and 5 years and the market trends, I'm going to eliminate non-core markets, so just those very relevant industry and sectors into here. And then I'm going to understand what's the market share looking like. So if I am if I am like entering the market, I would like to see who are the competitors already in this market and how is it that they are behaving in terms of dividing the market. So what's the market share? So I will just say, okay, given the circumstances and the behavior, whether these companies are performing well or not so well, etc., I will calculate that I will just take 25%. And then we arrive to the number of $30 billion, which is actually 20% of the TAM and 2% of the TAM. So this is an example, again, of these calculations of market size. Example of this startup from Cameroon called Gifted Mom. So what they provide is products for mothers who have children. So they calculate that the total maternal and baby health service market in Africa is $6 billion per year. But actually, because they're going to have sales through phone, they are actually taking of that entire market in Africa of maternal and baby health, they're going to take only the ones that are actually having mobile phones. So I want to calculate the mobile penetration, and from that, I see that I have a reduced number already. And then I estimate that I will only go into specific countries within Africa, so not the entire one, but just 7 countries to start, which stands for 45 million users. And I see that by 2022, I want to have 25% of the market share. So this is pretty much how they did it. And just a quick note, how did they come up with the $6 billion per year, let's say, maternal and baby health service market in Africa? First, they estimated how many mothers with baby from 0 to 5 years there exist, and this is probably from a big statistic provider. And then they said, okay, how much do they actually invest in an adult per year per health, and how much average revenue per user they expect from these services. So this is how they can calculate. So don't expect to necessarily Google market size of, let's say, mobile payments or restaurant delivery door to door in your city and then suddenly come up with a number. You'll probably have to compile different sources and come up with your own estimations. And as long as they are backed up and they really are reliable, you can make your own assumptions. Another way to also do this is to talk to other founders in startups that are similar, maybe in your market already or in another region or continent, because they might have already done this. So you can reach out to them and make them you just ask them that you want to understand a little bit more about the market that they are tackling, and probably as they are themselves entrepreneurs, they will also know the pain or the challenge that it can be sometimes to calculate the market. So this is a good practice. Do not hesitate to use LinkedIn, for example, for this. How big does the market need to be for an investor to be interested in it? So let's say that if I do my calculations of the first example, 1 billion sum market, so serviceable available market, and I estimate that I'm gonna get 5%, which is gonna be a revenue of $50 million. And then I am in my investment conditions. I'm saying that I'm raising Series A, so I'm looking for $4 million for 25% of my company and to run solution. The equity at exit is 14%, and the exit valuation is estimated at $350 million. And I expect my investors to have a 12 times return from what they invest. So this is the calculations that I've done. And the other example is, okay, I have a market that is smaller than that. So I have $100 million market size, not a $1 billion one. My market share is 5, but revenue is also smaller. I'm looking for a $2 million investment with the same conditions. The valuation expected of the company at an exit scenario is $35 million. And I see that the investor will get around 3.2 times what they invested in the company. So whatever the case is, we don't necessarily know for the second example if it's something that it's necessarily interesting enough for an investor. Whereas if you say you're going to get 12 times more and these are the conditions, and you pretty much have portrayed the market research in a way that is, it gives you enough trust. The investor has enough trust in your market, and 12 is an interesting multiple. Whereas the other, it's not necessarily bad, but it's more like a question mark. Try to aim for a SAM that is bigger than 100 million. This is just a best case practice if you want to have a number attached to it. Now, let's jump into the sources for the market size calculation. So we can go to industry reports, public reports by public organizations or governments or foundations or development banks, traffic of competing websites. So you can use something like Alexa, for example, to understand what is the traffic that certain competitors that you have detected are having. Similar web as well. Google keyword analysis and Google search. Pretty much these are the best sources for market size, and just make sure that you don't trust everything that you find, that you really go granular into the sources and where do they get their information, their data from, which is very important when doing any type of research. The bolder, like if you are bold enough and really sharp enough into your sources, this also shows a big professionalism from your side and a big seriousness. So you're not just making assumptions out of nothing. You actually done your homework and you have reliable sources. So you're prepared to tackle the challenges from investors whenever they ask you anything related to your market or your sources. Now, some investor red flags. The market size is incorrectly calculated. So if there is mathematical issue, then it's like, okay, you just didn't prepare well, because this is like the basics. So you haven't properly calculated your market, or you've estimated the share of your market just from I think 25% is going to be okay, but you don't have any foundation of it. The market is too niche, it's too small, so it's not necessarily interesting enough because it's too small in terms of quantity. So the next part of the pitch is the traction. So let's just quickly recap. You portrayed a problem, the importance of it and the severity of it. You've come up with a solution. You've shown that there is an opportunity because there is an interesting market to address. And now we want to see, what have you achieved so far? What are the milestones that you have managed to achieve? So traction. So what are the key metrics? What's the volume? How many paying users? If you don't have nobody paying yet, how many viewers or downloads or page viewers or users? Portray something that you're able to track and that it's relevant. What are your monthly revenue and expenses? What is your retention and your churn? So how much, what is the percentage of people actually that you keep within your business, and how fast are they living your product or your service? What are your growth rates, month to month, year per year? And what do you plan to achieve in the next few years in terms of traction? And definitely show hard numbers. You need to know your numbers and show clearly what has been achieved already and what do you project. Too much projection without necessarily achievement is not necessarily good, because, okay, we all know that projections are great and spreadsheets and slides are great until you actually see the reality. So make sure that you have a fair balance of what is it that you have achieved so far. And if you think that you don't necessarily have, um, let's say, interesting achievements so far, don't lie. Just say it and say that you're validating, that you have only users or downloads, but you don't have nobody paying. But this is what you expect to do in the next months because you are already putting some strategy in place. For example, don't exaggerate or confuse. Like if they ask you how many users do you have, you should be able to answer that concretely. What's the churn rate? You should be able to answer that directly. How much are you growing month by month? Don't start like navigating around the question because you don't remember or you don't necessarily have the answer. It's okay to say, I don't know, or you can say an approximate of, but don't exaggerate, don't confuse, and of course, don't give false information. This is the case of Ultra Casas, which is a startup from Bolivia, and I really like this slide because you can see, right, like boom, boom, boom. These are the number of listings because they have a marketplace for properties in Bolivia. So this is the number of listings. We have 5,000 daily sessions. We have 35 registered users. That doesn't mean paying users. We have 1,000 registered agencies, which doesn't mean necessarily contracts signed already. We have this number of mortgage leads, which again doesn't mean that they have actually closed, but they just want to show the traction. Mortgage requests, and then what has been the revenue in the 2017 year, and what do they expect for this 2020. So again, very bold. If you want to calculate the conversion rate, you can easily do that as well. So some red flags in this section. You're not able to explain the key assumptions in your projections. So if they ask you, okay, so you're expecting to grow 30% in the next month, like how do you plan to achieve it? And you don't have a concrete plan into place. You just think that a 30% is a nice number to grow, but you don't have a concrete plan. This is definitely a red flag. Show unrealistic or uninteresting projections. Are they actually reasonable? So also, if you are in an industry or in an activity that is affected by seasonality, for example, tourism or traveling or agriculture, because you're dependent on crops or agricultural field activity, you need to take this into account as well. And also, if you're not able to articulate a coherent marketing strategy on how you're going to achieve the next, let's say, the next future period of time in terms of traction. Again, you want to show what is it that you have achieved, but you also want to show what is it that that investors can expect that you will grow in the next months, years. Coming up next, how does the business work? So how are you making money? This is pretty much the question that you're going to ask yourself. So what is a revenue model? Is it a subscription, an annual one, a monthly one? Is it an on-demand? Is it a freemium like Spotify? Is it a commission? What is the format like? And it's okay if you have 1, 2, or 3, right? It's also okay if you want to start first validating one of them, but then you're planning to migrate. Let's say you want to do first free because you want to acquire as many users as you can, and then in the future you want to do it actually paid. So it's okay to combine. You don't need to have the revenue model one single one straight away. It's okay to vary, and it's also okay to say that you are testing an additional one because you have seen a potential into it. You also want to show here in your business model some part of your unit economics. So here we're going to enter into the CAC and the LTV. So one is your customer acquisition cost. So how much does it cost you to acquire one customer? And the LTV, what's the lifetime value of this customer? And here is the moment where you want to show costs, your fixed cost, your operational cost, your variable cost, how much is it incremental, depending on the volume that you sell, and how much does that represent versus the ones actually fixed, and what are the margins that you're having at the moment. Do explain the primary source of revenue in detail. People need to understand that if you are catering different revenue models, which one's going to be the primarily one that you have. So it is not uncommon to see that many startups, for example, they also have advertising as one of the parts of their business model. But is this the main one? Is this the one that's going to make you survive? Probably not. In some cases, it's just an additional one. So explain the primary one in detail very well. And don't show multiple sources without clear or understanding. Yeah, we're gonna do like advertising, but we're also gonna have like a freemium model. But if you want, we can also do a subscription. And then suddenly, like here, like the less the better, and the more sharp and bold and direct and straightforward you can be, the better as well. Remember that we are in the startup world, so it's a very high risk. So whatever you're pursuing, you want to take risks, but in a calculated way. And if you're making the step of actually taking the step of actually going to a risk, it has to be proven, and you have done your research, and it's a calculated one, really backed up with data. So here, for example, Alquilando, another startup that we have met in our journey. So they're a marketplace for real estate as well, and they say pretty much, okay, the brokerage percentage, so the broker percentage of that they get is 4%. If the insurance is 4%, and administration of the entire marketplace, or the entire, let's say, account is 5%. So our contract on average per each of the real estate agencies is 20K. And you are portraying in a very straightforward way not only that, but also what's the industry average. So you are positioning yourself automatically with this, with the way that Alquilando has done it in this example. And I don't know if you've seen, but on the top they say that the commissions. So you already know that they're probably taking commissions from the, let's say, the matches that they do of the deals. So the commissions coming from the marketplace, they take up to 75% of the revenue. So they know that this is their main revenue source. Unit economics, another example. 50K minimal deal size, average 5 years contract, so you show some stability. 3K customer acquisition cost, so it costs you 3,000 to acquire a customer. But then on the other hand, each customer is giving you around $200,000 of lifetime value, and you're planning to grow 3 times more by 2020. Investor red flags. How much do you spend on acquiring a customer? If you don't know how to answer this question, you better you better know how much is it that you're spending. And in here, you want to include all your marketing efforts. What is your customer lifetime value? How much revenue can a customer give you in the time that they're gonna be buying or consuming your product and your service? And here you definitely need to understand as well what is the time on average that they stay buying or consuming your product or service. What is your gross margin? What are your fixed costs? What are you planning to improve your LTV CAC ratio? What have you tried? So normally a good ratio is 3 times more, at least at seed start, is something that we consider healthy enough, so that the lifetime value is at least 3 times more than what the CAC is. And what is a typical sales cycle between initial customer contact and closing of a sale? So this is a typical question as well. How much does it take you to close a customer, to sign a deal? And depending on the answer, we might also understand how fast can you grow, or how much sales efforts you might need in the near future. In terms of costs as well, whenever you're asked what are your fixed costs, also think that this comes probably with another question in the back, which is, are you planning to do anything to reduce costs or fixed costs? And this is actually feasible if you're thinking, for example, in alternatives like automation, working more in improving some processes, using certain types of technologies like AI to reduce certain workload from full-time employees, or buying a software that is going to automate certain tasks. So you can definitely kind of think beforehand, how are you planning to diminish your fixed costs? Because after they ask you what are your fixed costs, there's going to be like, okay, well, do you plan to reduce by any means this number, etc. Who makes the company? So the team. Who is in the core team? How many people do you have? What relevant industry startup experience do they have? So if you are in the fintech sector, it will make a great sense that you have somebody that has worked in the banking industry before or in the financial sector. The same if you're looking into the agricultural industry or whatever industry, it's always important to have somebody that has an industry experience or a particular technology experience if you're using, for example, blockchain or AI or machine learning, etc. What's the ownership structure of your company? How much is allocated to the team, to the core team, and what is the percentage of that? What are their hiring plans? What did the team commit in terms of time and money? So it is not uncommon to see in the very early stages of a startup that founders have given either money from their personal savings or the famous FFF, so friends, fools, and family, but also the time. So this is something you can monetize. And if it's the case that you have only given time and you haven't given capital to the company, that's something called sweat equity. So the sweat that you produce when you are working. So you can say, okay, you just have like sweat equity. So you pretty much value the hours they have invested in working for the company versus the, let's say, the industry average or the hourly rate of their services. How much does it cost per hour? And this is how much they've invested in it. We also want to see here if the founders and the core team are working full time. And this is important because definitely somebody that is so a core team that is working full-time into a startup, it's much better perceived than a core team that is working part-time, because like, yeah, we're just trying. Because if you're not able to demonstrate that you are quitting your stable job, is probably because maybe you're not confident about your business. Again, it doesn't mean that this doesn't happen. It happens, and it happens a lot. You're also concerned about your personal life, but make sure that by the time you're raising money or by the time you're really getting serious, it's important that the core team is actually having a full-time devotion to the project. If not, why would an investor involved in a part-time project? Take your time and give some memorable points. So you can talk about, for example, how did you meet your co-founders? Where did you find them? What's the story behind? And avoid like titles like where did they study and what they study or curriculum or stuff. You can pretty much put it like very, very concretely. But remember, sometimes even I've seen some pitch decks and people put just the faces and the names, and that doesn't really tell us anything. At least it's a very famous person and known around the world, which doesn't need further introduction. But if it's just somebody of your team that is not well known or is not famous, and you just put their photograph and their name and without any further information, this definitely is not value added to the person that is reading it. So don't skip this. Don't skip the team. We want to see who is behind, who are the people crafting and pushing for your startup. And don't, again, show logos and expect that it's sold. We want to see beyond where did they study, what did they study. We want to see what is their contribution to the startup. Because if at the end of the day, they all studied in Ivy League universities and they have more than 10-year experience, but they all have the same profiles, it doesn't really make a lot of sense that you have a team that are pretty much the same. We want to see complementary skills and how do you nurture with each other differences to produce something that is solid. So this is where diversity and different skill set comes into play. Let's see an example. Here you see 3 people in the team. There is the co-founder, and then there is somebody that is probably part of the development team, and how much years of experience do they have, and what is it that they are providing. So you can see that the co-founder has some management consulting experience in different regions. It has worked for companies that are pretty known worldwide. Then there is the CTO, which has worked in IT project management, and it has a background of real estate and hotel family business. So this might be relevant to the business of the startup. And then the leader of the development team actually has more than 9 years of development and comes from a really well-known company, and there's other 11 team members. So this is a very good example on how to portray the team in a human way, but also showing what is it that the core team is providing. Investor red flags: uncoachable founders, solo founders, no complementary background sector expertise, cannot communicate in English if it's the case that you are in front of English-speaking investors, not being full-time with a startup, having bad records with existing investors. Investors will try to look you up and look for references, cannot remember key numbers, and then the no asshole rule. So the no asshole rule is related to the uncoachable founders. Because the passion that founders that we have met have, it's really energizing and it's amazing to see. But we also want to see that you are flexible and open enough to receive feedback. And believe me or not, there's a lot of founders which it's just impossible to coach them. They are so convinced about their startup, and this is great because it shows some confidence. But remember that being open to feedback doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to take into account the feedback, but it just shows some sort of resilience and high in emotional intelligence in being able to receive constructive opinions and feedback. So somebody that is uncoachable, remember, it is commonly referred to as a marriage between the investor and the entrepreneur. So you want to have a healthy relationship with somebody that is able to be open to hear your feedback. And a no asshole rule. There can be plenty of times which you are so confident about your startup and you have this confidence that really goes more than it should be, and it becomes a little bit of rude and egocentric. So try to avoid this because, again, investors, they want to see that you're prepared, they want to see somebody that's confident, but they also want to see somebody that has this humanity to take the team forward, and that is somebody that they can enjoy working with. And then the last point is, why are you raising capital? So why are you raising? What are you looking for money? So fundraising is hard. It's a hard process. So first ask yourself the question, do you really need it? Do you need a certain amount of money to go to the next level? Is it not that maybe you haven't found other alternatives like bootstrapping, making as much as you can for yourself and finding hacks around it? Because again, your company is gonna lose a part of, let's say you're gonna lose a part of the ownership of the company. So it's not just that you're raising money just because you need it. You must really make sure that you have exhausted all the different alternatives. And recently, we chose a winner at the Sisters World competition that actually won the competition in more than 80 ecosystems around the world. And they haven't received any investment at all. So they have bootstrapped everything. So for us, that's impressive to build sort of an emporium around the world and so much revenue per month and interesting margins with no funding at all. It shows so much about the team, the resilience, and the resourcefulness that they have. So do you really need to fundraise? What's your current cash situation? How much do you have, and what's the burn rate? So how much cash you're burning every month, and what's your runway? So you have a runway of 8 months, 10 months, 2 years. So how much can you survive without any funding being injected into your company? And the burn rates, how much cash you're burning every month. And here, in terms of growth, you also want to show the investors. So if they are to invest money in your startup, how is it that you can grow? So you can grow 10 more customers per month. That's the orange line. or 5 or 2. So depending, of course, on let's say the number of customers that you're going to be able to acquire, the revenue. So you want to show also as well this. So the projections, depending if you're able to receive this, let's say, acceleration and this push of cash into your business, how much can you grow with it? Investors fund plans, not capital shortage. You're not pitching your business, you're pitching the investment opportunity. So make sure that you start the fundraising exercise not in the worst time of your startup or whenever it's already too late. Again, investors want to look for investment opportunities, something that is sexy enough. So think about it at party. So like the best moment of the party, that's the moment that you want to hit the consideration. So do not wait to be short of capital to start looking for investment. So in the ask, how much do you need? If it's money, what are the funds for? What are you going to allocate this money for? Is it going to be team? Is it going to be acquiring more customers, expanding to a new region, expanding your product, building and enhancing your existing product, optimizing certain features of it, hiring top talent, going to another city, etc. How long your runway will be? So how much will this allow you to, if I'm going to invest money in your startup, how much can you survive? How much time can you survive with this? And when are you considering to be raising next, and for what factors? So let's say right now I might be raising because I want to expand my team and it's pretty much about talent acquisition. But then I expect that when I'm pretty much tackled the entire South American market, I'm looking to fundraise money to expand to North America or to Africa. So not only when, but also what are the reasons that you're foreseeing to invest the money for. What terms is the investment that you're seeking for considered in, and who has already committed funds. So this last point really gives a lot of credibility by showing that you are already in conversations or that you have already committed, you have already investors committed in your startup and your round. This shows some credibility, and it's not uncommon to see that there is a higher trend of investors wanting to invest in your startup if there is somebody already committed to it, because it just means that somebody is taking the risk, and this is all about risk capital. Know your numbers, be realistic, so have comparables into other startups, valuations, etc. And ask for things that aren't just money. So it's not just for you to receive the money of whoever has it, but you also want to make sure that whoever investor you're talking to is gonna be able to give you maybe more than just that, either connections, network, distribution channels, market insights, unfair advantages, technological developments, knowledge, etc. And it's completely fine for you to be selective as well, to know who do you want to receive the money from. And as for things, if you're looking for talents, you can say that we're hiring a CTO, we're hiring a sales lead, we're looking for a software provider to automate this part of our accounting process, etc. What things to avoid? Don't just ask for the sake of asking. Even if you maybe are not fundraising at the moment, but you're just looking for strategic partners or feedback, this is completely valid to say it. And actually it shows that you know what you exactly need. So this is an example of Madison. Is a startup that we have met in Dominican Republic, and they say we're looking for $400,000 to cover 12 months of operations, and this is going to be devoted to new features development, growth, user base, and marketing, and operational costs. So you know exactly what is it that your money is going to be invested in. And probably if I'm to ask the founders of Madison, they will be able to provide even more granularity into what is it that exact features they're going to develop, what are these operational costs that they want to serve, and what is the marketing activities that they're pursuing. So it's not just asking just for asking, but it's pretty much, it has to be backed up with calculations we expect that you have already prepared. So to wrap up, we have gone through the problem. So how important, how painful, how big it is, who feels it, the solution, what makes you unique, what makes you stand out, what is it that you actually are, what's the market potential. So the TAM, the sum, and the sum, and how much you are going to be, how much piece of a cake you're gonna be tapping into in the beginning. Um, the traction, the growth plan, what have you achieved so far? What are your projections for the next months and years? The business model, so how you're gonna make money specifically. Just forgot in the market, you also want to tap into the competitors in case you have competitors here as well. What makes you stand differently from them? So business model, how are you going to make money? What are your unit economics? What's your CAC? What's your LTV? The team, what's the dream team behind your startup? And then the ask, what is it that you need? So with this, I expect to have given you certain light into the anatomy of a pitch. It's not a set on stone. These are suggestions that we have experienced as it starts to be successful among our entrepreneurs that we mentor and coach. So hope this is useful and good luck, and always be pitching. You never know who you're talking to. Maybe they are an investor themselves, or they can